Joan Vassos makes major change to wedding plans. Golden Bachelorette Joan Vassos found love again with Chuck Chappell after her husband passed away in 2021. While she initially wasn't looking for a proposal, she said yes when Chuck proposed during the season finale. Joan opened up about a major change she made to their wedding plans. Keep reading for all the details. Joan Vassos talks early connection with Chuck Chappell knew before he joined the Golden Bachelorette that Joan Vassos was the one for him. He opened up recently about how a social media video he saw of Joan sparked his interest. It took her a little longer to feel a connection with him. She went into the dating show with an open mind and an open heart, willing to give every suitor a fair chance. But sparks flew with Chuck on their first one-on-one date to Disneyland early in the season. Joan Vassos explained what happened to People magazine. That initial confidence and how easy we were together was really evident at the Disneyland date. After that, it built very quickly, and we got to know each other pretty well, the important stuff. She continued, then once we were engaged, it was time to find out the other stuff. But the important stuff we already had settled. As for Chuck, he told the outlet, by the time we got to Bora Bora, I knew I loved her and wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Golden Bachelorette couple not rushing down the aisle. Unlike the golden couple before them, Joan Vassos and Chuck Chappell aren't rushing to the altar. Millions of viewers tuned in to watch Gary Turner and Theresa Nist marry in a televised wedding special, only to watch the couple file for divorce 3 months later. Joan Vassos sat at the head of her kitchen table, staring at the pristine wedding planner spread out in front of her. The glossy pages were adorned with floral sketches, swatches of champagne-colored silk, and carefully curated photos of elaborate flower arrangements. The table was a battlefield of potential. Menus, invitation mock-ups, and sketches of bridesmaid dresses were scattered everywhere. It should have felt exciting, but instead, a knot of unease coiled in her stomach. The wedding was 4 months away, and by all accounts, it was shaping up to be the society event of the year. Joan, the only daughter of the prominent Vassos family, was marrying Andrew Greer, a rising star in the tech industry. The engagement had been splashed across the society pages, the announcement framed by a portrait of the perfect couple. Joan's raven black hair and striking blue eyes complemented Andrew's sandy blonde charm. Together, they looked like the ideal match. But something felt off. Joan flipped to the checklist page of her planner. Every box was checked off in neat black ink. Venue, the Crystal Pavilion. Catering, Le Cordon Bleu trained chefs. Dress, custom made by a designer whose name carried so much weight. Joan hesitated to even mention it aloud for fear of sounding pretentious. It was all too perfect. "Joni, are you okay?" Her best friend Lily walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She slid one across the table to Joan and took a seat. "You've been staring at that thing for an hour." Joan sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I don't know, Lily. Something doesn't feel right." Lily raised an eyebrow. "About the wedding or Andrew?" "The wedding," Joan said quickly, then paused. "I mean, Andrew is great. He really is. But this, all of this," she gestured at the chaos on the table, "it doesn't feel like me." Lily took a sip of her coffee, her green eyes thoughtful. "Then maybe it's time to make it feel like you. What would Joan Vassos' dream wedding actually look like?" That was the question, wasn't it? Joan leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. When she pictured her wedding, it wasn't the grand ballroom of the Crystal Pavilion or the gold-plated invitations. It was something smaller, more intimate. A gathering of their closest friends and family, somewhere meaningful. Joan opened her eyes, a flicker of excitement replacing the doubt. I think I want to change everything." Lily nearly choked on her coffee. "Everything? Joni, you're 4 months out. That's insane." "Maybe," Joan said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "But isn't it crazier to have a wedding that doesn't feel like me?" The first person Joan called was her mother. "Joan, darling, what's this about a change?" Sophia Vassos asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Joan hesitated, Her mother had been deeply involved in the planning process, throwing herself into every detail with gusto. "Mom, I've been thinking. The wedding, it feels too formal. It's not what Andrew and I really want." Sophia's pause on the other end of the line felt like an eternity. "Not what you want," she repeated slowly. "I want something smaller. More personal," Joan explained. "Maybe at the vineyard upstate where Andrew and I had our first weekend away." "The vineyard?" Sophia sounded incredulous. "Joan, that's—" "Perfect," Joan interrupted. "It's perfect for us." After a long silence, Sophia finally sighed. "All right, darling. If that's what you truly want, we'll make it work." Breaking the news. Telling Andrew was easier than Joan expected. When she broached the topic during dinner that evening, he looked at her with a mix of surprise and relief. "I thought I was the only one feeling that way," he admitted. "The whole thing has been so over the top. I'd love something more us." That sealed it. The following week, Joan and Andrew visited the vineyard. The rolling hills, the rustic barn, and the rows of grapevines shimmering in the late afternoon sun felt like home. It was a far cry from the crystal chandeliers and gilded walls of their original venue, but it felt right. The backlash, of course, not everyone was thrilled with the change. Joan's extended family, accustomed to grand displays of Vassos wealth, raised eyebrows at the news. "A vineyard? Isn't that a bit rustic?" Her Aunt Eugenia sniffed during Sunday brunch. Joan smiled politely. "It's exactly what Andrew and I want." The guest list, originally over 300 people, was whittled down to just 50. Some acquaintances took offense at being excluded, but Joan didn't care. The people who truly mattered understood. The transformation. Planning the new wedding was a whirlwind, but it was exhilarating. Joan traded towering floral arrangements for wildflowers picked from the vineyard's own gardens. Instead of a formal seated dinner, they opted for a family-style feast with farm-to-table dishes. Her designer dress was exchanged for a simpler gown, a flowing silhouette with delicate lace that matched the romantic setting. For Andrew, a tailored linen suit replaced the traditional tuxedo. Even the invitations changed. Handwritten notes on recycled paper replaced the gilded monstrosities. Joan spent an afternoon with Andrew crafting each one, and they both agreed it felt far more personal. The big day. When the day finally arrived, Joan stood on the terrace overlooking the vineyard, a light breeze rustling her veil. She felt a calmness she hadn't expected, a sense of certainty that had eluded her in the months prior. Lily came up behind her, adjusting the hem of Joan's dress. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," Joan whispered, her eyes misting as she gazed at the scene below. The ceremony took place under a wooden arch adorned with wildflowers, with the sun setting behind them. Andrew's vows brought tears to Joan's eyes, and when it was her turn to speak, she felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. The reception that followed was everything Joan had hoped for: laughter, music, and the kind of joy that couldn't be orchestrated. Guests danced barefoot under strings of twinkling lights. Wine flowed freely, and Joan's cheeks ached from smiling. As the night wound down, Joan and Andrew stole a moment alone, standing under the stars. "You did it," Andrew said, pulling her close. "We did it," Joan corrected, resting her head on his shoulder. And in that moment, Joan knew she had made the right choice. This wedding wasn't what anyone had expected, but it was exactly what they needed.